I've always thought mirrors were just simple things, glass and silver, reflecting back what's right in front of them. But what if one day yours didn't? What if it showed you a room that wasn't yours at all? A place that felt alive with secrets from another time. My name is Charles Murphy, and this is exactly what happened to me. I'm 42 now, living in this creaky old Victorian house on the outskirts of a foggy little town called Eldridge in upstate New York. I moved here about 5 years ago after my wife left me. Needed a fresh start, you know? The house was cheap, full of history, or so the realtor said with that fake smile. Little did I know that history wasn't done with the living. It started innocently enough, but it built into something that still makes my skin crawl when I think about it. Stick with me, I promise, by the end, you'll be checking your own mirrors twice. It was a rainy autumn evening when I first noticed it. I'd just gotten home from my job at the local library. Yeah, I'm that guy who shelves books and helps kids with their homework. Nothing exciting, but it pays the bills. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that presses in on you after a long day. I trudged upstairs to the bathroom, flicked on the light, and splashed water on my face. As I looked up, dripping, something felt off. The reflection showed my tired eyes, the stubble on my chin, but behind me, the room wasn't quite right. My bathroom has this ugly floral wallpaper from the 70s that I've been meaning to strip, but in the mirror, the walls looked bare, painted a faded blue, like something out of an old photograph. I blinked hard, chalking it up to exhaustion. Maybe the steam from the water was playing tricks. I dried off and went to bed, but that night, sleep didn't come easy. Dreams flickered with images of empty rooms, shadows shifting just out of sight. The next morning, I laughed it off over coffee. Houses like this one, built in the late 1800s, have their quirks: drafty windows, groaning floors. Eldridge is full of them. It's an old mill town where time seems to stick in the corners. I'd heard stories from locals about the place, previous owners whispering about unsettled spirits, but I'm not the superstitious type. Grew up in the city, rational to a fault. Still, as I got ready for work, I glanced at the mirror again. There it was, the blue walls, and now, a faint outline of furniture that didn't match mine. My sink is modern, white porcelain, but in the reflection, it looked like an antique basin with brass fixtures. No steam this time, no excuse. My heart picked up a beat. I reached out, touched the glass. It was cold, normal. But when I turned around, my real bathroom stared back, floral paper and all. It was like the mirror was lying to me, showing a ghost of what used to be. I tried to shake it off during the day, burying myself in work, sorting through dusty archives. I even casually looked up the house's history. Nothing jumped out. Built in 1887 by a mill owner named Elias Thorne, passed through a few families. No scandals mentioned. But that evening, as the sun dipped low and the house filled with that heavy dusk light, I couldn't resist checking again. Standing there, staring, the reflected room seemed sharper. Now I could make out details. A wooden chair in the corner, tilted slightly as if someone had just stood up. A window with lace curtains that fluttered, though there was no breeze in my world. And then, the faintest sound. A whisper? No, more like a sigh, echoing from somewhere deep. I froze, ears straining. It wasn't coming from the house. It felt like it was from inside the mirror itself. My reflection looked back at me, pale. But in that other room, the air seemed thicker, charged with waiting. Days blurred into a routine laced with unease. I'd avoid the bathroom mirror when I could, using the small one in my bedroom instead. But curiosity is a sneaky thing. It creeps in when you're alone. One night, after a particularly stormy day where thunder rattled the windows, I found myself drawn back. The power flickered, candles casting long shadows. In the mirror, the blue room glowed faintly, as if lit by gas lamps. And there, in the far corner, a shape. Not clear, not human exactly, but a silhouette that suggested presence. It didn't move, but I swear it was watching. My breath caught. I leaned closer, fogging the glass. When I wiped it away, the shape had shifted, closer now, elongated, like fingers reaching. I backed away, heart hammering, and slammed the door. That night, sleep brought nightmares of being trapped in that room, walls closing in, the air tasting of dust and forgotten regrets. I started researching more seriously. At the library, I dug into old records during my lunch breaks. Elias Thorne, the original owner, had a family, wife and 2 daughters. They vanished one winter in 1892, no bodies, no note. Just gone. The house sat empty for years after that, locals calling it cursed. I laughed it off at first, but now, it fit. Maybe the mirror was a window to that past, replaying echoes. I even confided in a coworker, old Mrs. Hargrove, who'd lived in Eldridge her whole life. Mirrors hold memories, she said softly, her eyes distant. Sometimes they don't let go. No real advice, just that chill in her voice. Back home, I covered the mirror with a sheet, but it didn't help. Sounds started leaking through, soft footsteps padding across across unseen floors, a door creaking open somewhere that wasn't there. As weeks passed, the anomalies grew bolder. One evening, while brushing my teeth in the dim light, I saw it clearly, a hand pressing against the glass from the other side. Not aggressive, but insistent, palm flat, fingers splayed. My own hand trembled as I reached out instinctively, but I pulled back just in time. The room in the mirror had changed too, now cluttered with old trunks and faded photographs on the walls, faces blurred but staring. I felt eyes on me, not just from the reflection but from the house itself. Shadows in my real room seemed longer, cooler. I turned quickly, expecting someone behind me, but nothing. The air grew heavy, scented faintly with lavender, like old perfume lingering from a century ago. Sleep became a battle. I'd wake to whispers that faded as soon as I sat up, words I couldn't quite catch, but they sounded pleading. I decided to investigate the house properly. Armed with a flashlight, I explored the attic one rainy afternoon. Dust motes danced in the beam, revealing boxes of forgotten relics, yellowed letters, a child's doll with porcelain eyes that followed me. One letter, dated 1891, from Elias to his wife. The reflections deceive, my love. I see rooms that shift in the night. My blood ran cold. Had he experienced this too? As I read on, thunder boomed outside, and the house groaned in response. Back downstairs, I uncovered the mirror again, compelled. The blue room was dimmer now, but alive with movement, curtains billowing wildly, papers scattering across the floor as if in a windstorm. And in the center, a figure, vague, feminine, dress flowing, turning slowly toward me, her face obscured, but I felt her gaze pierce through. Panic set in that night. I paced the halls, questioning my sanity. Was this grief from my divorce manifesting, or something real, pulling me in? The whispers grew louder, forming fragments. Find us, hidden. I searched the bathroom walls, knocking for hollow spots, but found nothing. Yet in the mirror, the figure gestured, pointing downward, toward the floor. My floor was tiled, but in the reflection, wooden planks. I knelt, prying at the edges with a screwdriver, heart racing. Splinters bit my fingers, but beneath one loose tile, a small compartment. Inside, a locket, gold engraved with E.T. for Elias Thorne. Opening it revealed a tiny portrait, a woman and two girls, their eyes hauntingly familiar. The discovery fueled my obsession. I wore the locket, feeling its weight like a talisman, but that only intensified things. Now, the mirror showed glimpses of daily life in that other room. A woman sewing by the window, children playing silently. They never acknowledged me directly, but sometimes their heads would tilt, as if listening. The atmosphere thickened, cold spots bloomed in my bathroom, breath visible in the air. One midnight, wide awake, I watched as the scene shifted to night in the mirror, candles flickering, shadows dancing. The family huddled together, fear etched in their postures. Something approached from the darkness beyond their door, unseen but ominous. I pounded on the glass, yelling silently, but they couldn't hear. The mirror vibrated under my fists, and for a split second, my hand felt pulled, as if the barrier thinned. I began avoiding mirrors altogether, even covering the ones in other rooms. But the pull was magnetic. Eldridge's fog seemed denser now, wrapping the house like a shroud. Locals noticed my pallor. Mrs. Hargrove pressed me for details, but I brushed it off. Deep down, I knew I was entangled. One evening, as twilight bled into night, I returned to the bathroom. The reflected room was in chaos. Furniture overturned, walls scarred. The family was gone, but stains, dark, ambiguous, marred the floor. And then, writing appeared on the mirror's surface, fogging from the other side. They're coming for you too. My reflection distorted, twisting into something not quite me. I fled the room, locking the door, but the house felt alive, walls pulsing with unseen energy. Nights blurred into dread-filled vigils. I'd hear knocking from inside the bathroom, rhythmic, insistent. Ignoring it only made it louder, echoing through the vents. Finally, one storm-ravaged night, I confronted it. Flashlight in hand, I opened the door. The mirror glowed unnaturally, the blue room a vortex of swirling mist. Figures emerged, not the family, but shapes, elongated, whispering in chorus. They reached out, fingers breaching the glass, cold tendrils brushing my skin. I screamed, slamming the door, but the touch lingered, icy and promising more. What were they? Echoes of the lost? Or something hungrier, using the mirror as a door? The next day, desperate, I sought answers in the town's archives. Buried in a forgotten file, the Thorne disappearance wasn't natural. Whispers of a curse, tied to a hidden room in the house, sealed after a tragedy. A ritual gone wrong? The details were vague, but it mentioned mirrors as portals, reflections trapping souls. My house had one such mirror, perhaps. Racing home, I tore at the bathroom walls, hammer in hand. Plaster crumbled, revealing brick, and behind it, a small door boarded up. Prying it open released a gust of stale air, lavender-scented, leading to a narrow space. Inside, remnants of a child's room, blue walls faded, toys scattered, and in the center, another mirror, identical to mine, but shattered. Touching the shards, visions flooded me, the Thorne family, hiding from something ancient, awakened by Elias's meddling in occult books. They sealed themselves in, but the entity followed through the reflections, twisting reality. Now, it hungered for new vessels. I staggered back, the house shaking as if awakening. Back in the bathroom, my mirror showed the hidden room, not empty, but filled with those shapes, closing in. My own face in the reflection smiled back, but it wasn't my smile. Predatory, knowing. I barricaded myself in the living room that night, but sleep evaded me. Whispers seeped through the floors. Join us. The room waits. Dawn brought no relief. The fog outside mirrored the haze in my mind. I knew I had to destroy the mirror, but fear paralyzed me. As evening fell, compelled, I returned. The glass pulsed, the other room alive with motion. Hands pressed from within, dozens now, begging or beckoning. One broke through, a pale arm, grasping air. I swung a chair, shattering the mirror into fragments. Silence fell, heavy and absolute. But as I swept the pieces, one shard caught my eye. In it, a tiny reflection of the blue room, intact, with my figure trapped inside, pounding silently. The house settled after that, but the unease lingered. I boarded up the hidden door, sold the locket at a pawn shop. Yet, sometimes, in peripheral glances at windows or puddles, I catch glimpses, rooms that aren't mine, watching. Eldridge feels smaller now, its history pressing close. If you're listening, check your mirrors tonight. What if they're showing more than you think? You know how sometimes you think the worst is over, that you've broken the spell and can finally breathe again? I thought that too, after I smashed the mirror into 100 pieces and swept them into a trash bag, burying it deep in the garage like some guilty secret. My name is Charles Murphy, still 42, still stuck in this old Victorian house in Eldridge, upstate New York, where the fog never really lifts in winter. It's been 3 weeks since that night, and for a while, everything felt almost normal. The house was quieter, the air lighter, no more whispers threading through the vents. I even started sleeping through the night again. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that some doors, once cracked open, don't close so easily. What I didn't realize was that shattering the mirror hadn't ended anything. It had only changed the rules. It started small, the way these things always do, creeping in so gently you almost welcome it. One morning, while shaving in the little handheld mirror I'd bought as a temporary replacement, I noticed the reflection lagging. Just a fraction of a second, like an old video buffering. My razor moved, but the image in the glass trailed behind, reluctant. I told myself it was nothing, maybe a trick of the cheap silvering. But that evening, as I passed the hallway window on my way to the kitchen, I caught a glimpse of movement outside, or what should have been outside. Instead of the snow-dusted pines and the empty street, the glass showed that same faded blue room, empty now, but waiting. The chair still tilted in the corner, curtains motionless. I stopped dead, heart kicking against my ribs. Windows aren't mirrors, I thought. They reflect, sure, but only what's real. Yet there it was, clear as day, until I blinked and the winter night rushed back in. I tried to stay rational. Stress, lack of sleep, maybe the house's old glass warping images. I work at the library, remember? I'm surrounded by facts and logic every day, so I threw myself into routine, cataloging returns, helping students with research papers, pretending everything was fine. But at home, the reflections kept finding ways to intrude. The darkened screen of my laptop when it slept would flicker awake with faint outlines of furniture that wasn't in my office. The stainless steel toaster showed distorted glimpses of lace curtains fluttering in a non-existent breeze. Even the spoon in my coffee cup one morning reflected not my tired face, but a pale hand reaching toward me from beneath the surface. I dropped it, scalding liquid splashing across the table, and for the rest of the day my fingers trembled. Winter deepened, and Eldridge turned into a ghost town under blankets of snow. Fewer people at the library meant more time alone with my thoughts, and those thoughts kept circling back to the hidden room I'd found behind the bathroom wall. I'd boarded it up hastily that night, nails hammered and crooked, telling myself I'd deal with it properly later, but later never came. Instead, I started dreaming about it, not nightmares exactly, but vivid visits. I'd stand in that narrow space with the blue walls, the shattered mirror glittering on the floor like frost. Only in the dreams, the shards were whole again, forming a mosaic that showed scenes, the Thorne family sitting quietly at a table, heads bowed, Elias writing furiously in a leather-bound journal, the two little girls playing with dolls that turned their porcelain faces toward me, and always, in the background, that sense of something vast and patient watching from the corners where light didn't reach. One particularly brutal night, when the wind howled like it wanted inside, I woke suddenly at 3 a.m., drenched in sweat despite the cold. The house was silent, but I felt observed. Moonlight spilled through the bedroom window, painting silver stripes across the floor. My eyes drifted to the full-length mirror on the closet door, one I'd forgotten to cover in my earlier panic. It stood there innocently, reflecting my rumpled bed, the stack of unread books on the nightstand. But as I stared, the image shifted subtly. The bed in the reflection remained perfectly made, sheets tucked with precision. No me lying there. Instead, the room appeared empty, waiting, and in the doorway of the reflected closet stood a figure, tall, indistinct, head tilted as if listening for my breathing. I didn't move, didn't dare breathe loud. Minutes passed, or maybe hours, until the shape dissolved into shadow and my own disheveled reflection returned. I didn't sleep again that night. The next day, driven by a mix of fear and stubborn curiosity, I returned to the library archives. Mrs. Hargrove noticed my hollow eyes and pressed a cup of tea into my hands without asking questions. I dug deeper this time, past the sanitized records into the private collections donated by old families. There, in a box of miscellaneous papers, I found a thin journal, leather cover cracked, pages brittle. No name on it, but the handwriting matched the letter I'd found before. Elias Thorne's. Entries from 1891 to 1892, increasingly frantic. He wrote about purchasing an antique mirror from an estate sale in Europe, something about Venetian glass crafted in the 1700s with unusual properties. He believed it could capture moments, preserve them like photographs in silver. At first, it delighted him, reflections lingering after people left the room. Then the lingering turned into independent movement, rooms appearing that hadn't existed in decades. Finally, entries about seeing the space between, a place where lost things gathered, hungry for the warmth of the living. He described attempts to seal it, rituals from forbidden books, painting symbols around the frame in lamb's blood, though he crossed that out, ashamed. The last pages were smeared, ink running as if from tears. They took my girls first. I hear them calling from inside the glass. My wife followed, thinking she could bring them back. Now it calls me. The room is ready. The journal ended abruptly. No mention of what it truly was, only that mirrors were doors, and doors, once opened, invited crossing both ways. I sat there in the dim archive room until closing time, the weight of those words settling in my chest like ice. Back home, the atmosphere had thickened again. The air carried that faint lavender scent, stronger now, mixed with something metallic. Footsteps echoed occasionally overhead when I was downstairs, soft and deliberate, like someone learning the layout of the house all over again. I avoided reflective surfaces as much as possible, eating by candlelight, covering windows at dusk with heavy curtains. But isolation only amplified the unease. One evening, while reading in the living room, some mindless thriller to distract myself, I heard a faint tapping from the upstairs bathroom. Tap, 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 measured, patient. I ignored it at first, turning pages louder than necessary. But it persisted, growing into a gentle scratching, as if fingernails testing plaster. Finally, unable to stand it, I climbed the stairs with a flashlight, though the hall light worked fine. The bathroom door stood ajar, though I'd closed it weeks ago. Inside, the boarded-up wall remained intact, nails still crooked, but on the floor, scattered like fallen leaves, were shards of mirror, sharp, glinting. I knew I'd disposed of them all, yet here they were, arranged in a loose circle. In the center lay the locket I thought I'd sold, chain coiled neatly. Heart pounding, I picked it up. The portrait inside had changed. The woman and girls now faced forward, eyes wide, mouths open in silent warning, and behind them, in the tiny background, a tall shadow loomed. That night marked the turning point. The reflections no longer waited for me to look. They began imposing themselves. In dreams, I walked through the blue room freely, touching the cool walls, feeling dust under my fingers. The family was there sometimes, beckoning me closer, pointing toward corners where darkness pulled thicker than it should. Other times, the room was empty except for that patient presence, shaping itself slowly into something almost human. I'd wake with bruises on my arms, fingerprint-shaped, though I live alone. Cold spots followed me from room to room, and worst of all, my own reflection began behaving strangely, smiling when I didn't, turning its head to watch when I looked away. Desperate, I considered leaving the house. Packed a bag one afternoon, telling myself I'd stay in a motel until I could sell the place. But as I reached for my car keys on the hall table, the polished surface reflected not the entryway, but the blue room, fully furnished now, warm light glowing from an unseen source. And there, sitting in the tilted chair, was a figure that looked exactly like me. Same tired eyes, same stubble, same flannel shirt I was wearing. He raised a hand in greeting, slow and deliberate. I stumbled back, keys clattering to the floor. When I looked again, the table showed only the normal hallway. But the message was clear, part of me was already there. I didn't leave that day. Couldn't explain why, exactly, fear, fascination, or something pulling from the other side. Instead, I began experimenting, carefully, held up a small makeup mirror I found in a drawer, angling it to catch glimpses without direct exposure. Through it, I watched the other Charles moving through daily routines, reading the same books, drinking coffee from an identical mug, but always pausing to stare toward the glass, as if aware of being observed. Once, he mouthed words I couldn't hear, pressing his palm to the inside surface. The glass grew cold under my fingers in response. Winter solstice came, the longest night of the year, and the house felt charged, humming beneath the floorboards. Snow fell heavy and silent outside, erasing the world. Power flickered, then died completely, plunging everything into darkness broken only by moonlight. I lit candles, their flames steady despite the draft. Drawn upstairs again, almost against my will, I stood before the boarded wall. The scratching had returned, urgent now, accompanied by muffled thumps. Something wanted out, or in. With shaking hands, I began prying at the boards, nails grown free one by one. Dust billowed as the small door swung open, revealing the hidden room bathed in pale light from nowhere. The blue walls looked freshly painted, vibrant. Toys lay neatly arranged, as if waiting for children long gone. And in the center, where the shattered mirror had been, stood a new one, tall, ornate frame gleaming, glass flawless. My reflection stared back, but beside it stood the Thorne family, translucent yet solid, eyes pleading. Behind them, the tall shadow stretched wall to wall, featureless but immense. I understood then. The mirror hadn't been destroyed. It had simply relocated, rebuilding itself in the place where the barrier was thinnest. And now, on this longest night, the door stood wide open. You know that feeling when you're standing on the edge of something irreversible, like the world is holding its breath just for you? That's where I was, staring into that pristine mirror in the hidden room, with the Thorne family flickering like old film projections beside my own reflection, and that enormous shadow swelling behind them. My name is Charles Murphy, still clinging to sanity at 42 in this fog-shrouded Victorian trap of a house in Eldridge, upstate New York. The solstice night stretched on forever, snow muffling any sound from the outside world, leaving me alone with the hum of the impossible. I'd opened the door, literally and maybe metaphorically, and now whatever had been waiting for over a century was stirring, tasting the air of my reality. But here's the thing, fear can turn to resolve when you've got nothing left to lose. I wasn't about to let it pull me in without a fight. What happened next still haunts my quieter moments, and if you're listening, maybe it'll make you pause before glancing at your own reflections too long. The air in the hidden room was thicker than the rest of the house, laced with that persistent lavender and an undercurrent of decay, like roses left too long in a vase. The blue walls seemed to breathe, expanding slightly with each flicker of the candle I held. The power was still out, and my flashlight beam danced erratically in my trembling hand. In the mirror, the Thorne family stood frozen in tableau, Elias with his stern mustache and weary eyes, his wife with a hand clasped over her mouth, and the two girls clutching dolls that mirrored the one I'd found in the attic. Their clothes were period perfect, high collars and long skirts, but their expressions, pleading, urgent, as if they knew time was unraveling. The shadow behind them pulsed, formless yet suggesting limbs, eyes, a hunger that predated the house itself. My reflection, sandwiched between them, looked haggard, but there was a spark in those eyes, mine, I hoped, that said I wasn't done yet. I stepped closer, boots scuffing on the dusty wooden floor that matched the one in the reflection. The glass was cool to the touch, but not cold like before. It thrummed faintly, like a heartbeat syncing with mine. "What do you want?" I whispered, my voice cracking in the silence. No answer, of course, but the figures shifted, the girls tilted their heads, Elias pointed downward, toward the floorboards beneath the mirror. The shadow recoiled slightly, as if annoyed. I knelt, setting the candle down carefully, its flame steady despite the draft whispering through cracks I couldn't see. The planks were old, warped, and with my pocket knife, I pried at the seams. Splinters dug in, but I ignored the sting. Beneath the first board, nothing but more dust. The second revealed a small cavity, and inside, bundled in faded cloth, was another journal, smaller than the one from the archives, its pages crammed with tight script. I sat back on my heels, unfolding it under the candlelight. This wasn't Elias's handwriting. It was softer, feminine. His wife's, perhaps, Amelia, from what I'd pieced together in my research. Entries dated just before their disappearance. Elias brings home wonders, but this mirror, it watches. At night, I see rooms from my childhood, long demolished, yet there they are, with figures moving as if alive. The girls say they hear laughter from inside. Later pages grew desperate. The shadow comes when we sleep. It promises reunion with lost ones, but I feel its lie. Elias speaks of sealing it, but the reflections multiply. We must hide what binds it. The last entry, scrawled hastily. The key is in the light. Burn the anchors, or it will cross. Anchors? I glanced up at the mirror, where the family now gestured frantically, pointing not just down but at the locket I'd left downstairs. No, wait. It was back in my pocket somehow, heavy against my chest. The shadow surged then, filling the glass like ink spilling, obscuring the thorns. A low moan echoed, not from the mirror but from the walls around me, vibrating through the floor. I scrambled to my feet, journal clutched tight. The room felt smaller, the blue walls inching inward. Or was that my imagination? No, the air pressure dropped, ears popping like in a descending elevator. I backed toward the door, but my foot caught on a loose plank, and I fell hard, candle tipping. Flame licked at the dry wood, catching quickly. Panic flared. Fire in an old house like this could consume everything. But as the light spread, the mirror reacted. The shadow writhed, shrinking from the glow, and the thorns became clearer, nodding as if approving. Burn the anchors, Amelia had written. Was the fire the key? Or was I about to trap myself in a blaze? I didn't have time to think. The flames grew, smoke curling up, stinging my eyes. I coughed, grabbing the locket from my pocket and hurling it into the fire. It popped open, the tiny portrait curling black at the edges. In the mirror, the girls screamed silently, but not in pain. In release, the shadow howled, a sound like wind through cracked glass, and cracks did appear, spiderwebbing across the surface. I lunged for the door, slamming it behind me as heat built. The bathroom filled with smoke seeping under the frame, but I ran downstairs, grabbing a fire extinguisher from the kitchen. By the time I returned, the blaze had died down unnaturally, as if starved of oxygen. The hidden door hung open, the room beyond charred but contained, no spread to the rest of the house. The mirror lay in ruins again. Shards blackened, the blue walls scorched to gray. Relief washed over me like cool rain. I collapsed against the wall, extinguisher clutched like a lifeline, watching wisps of smoke dance in the moonlight now filtering through a window. The house felt emptier. No whispers, no cold spots. Even the lavender scent faded, replaced by acrid char. I cleaned up the mess that night, boarding the door more securely with fresh nails and plywood from the garage. By dawn, exhausted but wired, I brewed coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring at my reflection in the spoon. Normal. Just me, no extras. Maybe it was over. Maybe burning the locket and the anchors, whatever tied the shadow to the reflections, had severed the connection. Eldridge's fog lifted slightly as the sun rose, and for the first time in months, the town looked almost welcoming. But peace is fragile, isn't it? A few days later, as winter's grip tightened, small things nagged at me. A window pane fogging up without reason, revealing faint outlines when I wiped it away. My laptop screen, when idle, showing a desktop background I didn't set. Blue walls, subtle but there. I dismissed them as remnants, echoes fading like a bad dream. Work at the library picked up with the new year. Kids back from holidays, needing help with projects. Mrs. Hargrove eyed me curiously but said nothing, just slipped me an old book on local folklore one afternoon. For light reading, she murmured. Inside, chapters on reflective hauntings, mirrors as thresholds to liminal spaces, where the lost lingered, drawing in the living to replace them. One tale mirrored mine, a family vanishing, their essences trapped in glass, feeding an entity that craved expansion. I read it cover to cover that night, candlelight again, power stable now, but habits die hard. The book suggested rituals for closure, salt circles, spoken words. Skeptical but spooked, I tried one, sprinkling salt around every reflective surface, muttering words from the pages that felt silly on my tongue. Bind the unseen, seal the veil. Nothing happened, no dramatic release, just me feeling foolish in an empty house. Sleep came easier after, dreamless for once. Weeks passed, January bleeding into February, snow piling high. I even started dating casually. A woman from the next town over, met at a coffee shop. Life normalizing, the horror receding to a story I'd tell someday, embellished for effect. Yet doubts crept in during quiet moments. One evening, while washing dishes, the sink's chrome faucet caught the light oddly. In its curved surface, distorted but unmistakable, a room, not my kitchen, but blue-tinged, with a figure moving slowly across. Not me. I froze, suds dripping from my hands, blinked, and it was gone. Coincidence? Reflection of the TV in the other room? I told myself yes, but sleep evaded me that night. The next day, at the library, I researched more, online this time, careful not to delve too deep. Forums on paranormal experiences, users sharing tales of mirror bleed, where shattering one only dispersed the phenomenon, like shattering a prism scatters light. That seeded paranoia. I began noticing reflections everywhere, car windows showing interiors that felt off, puddles after rain rippling with unfamiliar skies. Even my phone screen, when locked, sometimes lagged in unlocking, as if something else was loading first. I covered more surfaces, hung blankets over windows at night. The house, once creaky and familiar, now felt like a cage of potential portals. One stormy afternoon, power out again, I ventured back to the bathroom, plywood still firm. But faint scratching emanated from behind. No, not scratching, more like fingers tracing patterns. I pressed my ear to the wood, holding my breath. Whispers filtered through. Not done! Anchors remain. What anchors? I'd burned the locket, the journal singed in the fire. Then it hit me, the shards. I'd swept them up before, but in the chaos, had I gotten them all? I tore at the boards again, flashlight piercing the gloom. The hidden room looked as I'd left it, charred and empty, but in the corners, glints caught the beam, tiny fragments of mirror, overlooked in the smoke. As I gathered them, piecing a few together like a puzzle, images formed, snippets of the blue room, the family waving goodbye, or warning, the shadow lurked in each, diminished but persistent. I collected every last piece, wrapping them in the folklore book for good measure, and took them outside to the backyard fire pit. Snow fell softly as I doused them in lighter fluid and struck a match. Flames roared, glass popping and melting into slag. That should have been the end. The whispers stopped, reflections normalized. I even invited my date over, the house feeling warm and ordinary for once. But as we sat by the fireplace, laughing over wine, her compact mirror fell open on the coffee table. I glanced down instinctively, and there it was, a flash of blue, a hand pressing from inside, not hers, not mine. She didn't notice, but I did. The entity, whatever it was, had dispersed further, no longer tied to one mirror or room. It was in all reflections now, patient, waiting for moments of weakness. Months turned to seasons. I sold the house eventually, moved to a modern apartment in the city. No old mirrors, no history. But I avoid shiny surfaces still. Keep lights dim. Sometimes, in a stranger's sunglasses or a shop window, I catch glimpses, rooms that aren't mine, shadows shifting. Eldridge fades in my rearview, but the question lingers, what if it's not the house? What if it's me now, carrying the anchor inside? If you're hearing this, check your mirrors carefully. That room you see, is it really yours?